So it looks like we've finally gotten a new Marvel Legends Haslab, and this time around it features Giant-Man. But is this the Giant-Man that we've been hoping for, Soulmates, and is it worth backing? Be sure you stick around until the end, Soulmates, because we're going to talk about what we'd possibly like to see included with this project. Marvel Legends Haslabs have done pretty well for Hasbro. The Sentinel got funded and it had some QC issues, but that didn't seem to stop anyone from enjoying it. And Galactus got funded too, and that one fortunately didn't seem to have much in the way of QC issues, and it was overwhelmingly popular. Unfortunately though, 2022's Haslab, the Engine of Vengeance, was a total debacle. While the Sentinel was available for $350 and Galactus was available for $400, the Engine of Vengeance was available for, again, $350, and this time around it really didn't seem like there was all that much value that was included with the project. A few of the key issues that were affecting this particular project was that the car really wasn't doing anything that other cars at much lower price points weren't already doing, and also the action figures that were available with the project featured an incredible amount of reuse, which of course at retail is whatever, it's to be expected now and then, but with a crowdfunding project you do expect a little bit extra. The perception surrounding this project was that the value was supposed to be baked into the tiers, which is not supposed to be the case with a crowdfunding project. The base level project is supposed to be worth the price being asked, and then all the other tiers are just supposed to be extras. They're not supposed to be indicative of the value of the project. So needless to say, as neat as the base level Engine of Vengeance was, it wasn't really $350 neat. Not to mention there was the issue of the ill-fated early bird special, which was a bit of a pressure tactic being used to get the project fully funded in the course of a week, which is a pretty tough ask, and one that didn't pay off for Hasbro in the long run, because as soon as that early bird special failed, so did the entire project really. Fortunately, the new Giant-Man Haslab doesn't have an early bird special, so fortunately that issue will not be affecting this one. Instead, with the new Giant-Man Haslab project, we are looking at a much simpler Haslab project, and also one that appears to be lots more transparent than every other Haslab project that we've seen before it. And what I mean by that is that they've already told us what the tiers are, which is unexpected to say the least, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but first I want to talk about the quality of Giant-Man. This Giant-Man action figure is going to stand about 24 inches tall, so it's going to be decidedly smaller than Galactus by about 8 inches or so. And it is a very high quality action figure, no doubt, because when we look up close at the action figure, we do see a lot of textures down to the meshwork on the red portion of his costume, as well as more leathery textures on his gloves and his boots, and even on his strap that goes across his torso. These are all things that I would very much expect to see on a toy of this quality at a $200 price point. And indeed, this beats the quality of my old Toy Biz Build-A-Figure all to heck, because it really can't compete with the details that we're seeing here. The Toy Biz Marvel Legends Giant-Man action figure was essentially a standard Marvel Legends action figure blown up to giant size, and I guess you could say the same thing about the Hasbro action figure, because that is the essence of Giant-Man, but we are seeing a host of relief elements here that simply weren't available on the old Toy Biz action figure, such as the raised elements of the gloves against his forearms and the raised elements of his boots against his calves, as well as the detail on his shorts, the belt and the strap that are in fact separate pieces instead of just painted on his body. That does make a world of difference. Not to mention we're seeing a lot of little details like folds all over this costume that make it look very well lived in, like a superhero is actually using it, and it's always welcome. The textures on this action figure are so good that you can even see the stitching on the seams if you look up close, as well as the treads that are very well detailed on Giant-Man's boots. As far as the articulation goes on Giant-Man, we are seeing using mostly standard Marvel Legends articulation on him, and that includes the Ab Crunch plus Torso Rocker, which I am a huge fan of, and I'm glad to see it here on Giant-Man. This is the first time they've gotten an Ab Crunch on an action figure this size, so that is pretty exciting. But besides that, we are seeing some curious additions to the articulation of this giant action figure, including toe articulation, which is a huge thing to include with this one, and I'm so glad that they did it. I was nervous that they weren't going to do it, but they did, and I'm just going to say, wow, that is great. But perhaps most curious of all about Giant-Man is that he has crazy articulated fingers, to the point where his fingers are ball-jointed, so they can do all kinds of different poses, from snapping his fingers to simply gripping something or someone, or any number of things that you can think of to do with hands. Giant-Man can very likely do it. Some of the unusual yet exciting design features of Giant-Man include the straps on his torso, which apparently are not just attached to his belt as you might expect them to be. Apparently the strap is threaded through his codpiece at the bottom so that it actually becomes part of the action figure. I thought that was particularly interesting. And also, Giant-Man features a new type of eye design in which they use clear plastic with the pupils painted on the backside of that plastic. I thought that was absolutely fascinating and a very exciting addition. It wasn't something I was ever expecting, but it makes the eyes look ever more realistic than they already did, which I applaud definitely. And of course, another notable design feature on this Giant-Man action figure is that he has swappable faceplates. And the curious thing about that is that apparently the faceplates are going to be able to be swapped by pulling them out through the opening at the bottom of his mask, which does beg the question to me about how pliable that mask is going to be, and if it is going to hold up under the stress of changing the faceplates out. This is something they weren't able to demonstrate during the presentation of Giant-Man during their big reveal, so I would personally have to see more of that feature before I consider backing this project, because I need to know how durable that mask is going to be when you're switching faceplates, because if it's not all that durable and it's going to become misshapen, how well is it going to be able to hold those faceplates in? And how good is it going to look when you have those faceplates being swapped again and again? And that's perhaps my biggest criticism of this presentation, is that they didn't have this action feature ready to go to show us before they put the project up to be backed. To my mind, even if they only had a prototype, they needed to have a working prototype to demonstrate this action feature to us, because right now it feels very uncertain about how this is going to work. On a $20 action figure, it's kind of whatever, because at the end of the day, it's really not that much money, all things considered. But on a $200 action figure, I kind of need to see a little bit more than that. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. And if you're enjoying this Giant-Man video, soulmates, please give it a like, because these are pretty tough to put together and I really appreciate it. Speaking of the extra faceplates that are included with Giant-Man here, he has two base level faceplates that are included with him. One is a very angry face that looks like he's become absolutely enraged, and I particularly like this one because it looks like he's about to tear Ultron apart like he does in some of the promo photographs here. Also, it feels very appropriate because the shape of the angry face fits the contours of the mask, and that's a particularly nice design. The smiling face I like less because it makes Giant-Man look particularly evil when it's put in place, but all things considered, it is a nice addition onto what is a pretty decent level project here for $200. I also have to say that looking at these faceplates in isolation is one of the freakier experiences that I've ever had while analyzing and reviewing toys, and that covers the base level project, but there are two tiers that are included with this project, and the Hasbro Marvel Legends team has revealed them right off the bat, which is a pleasant display of transparency, absolutely. The first tier is going to be unlocked at 12,000 backers, and what it is a Marvel Zombies faceplate that has a zombified faceplate, of course, and then it also has some zombified antenna for Giant-Man. So you can take out the antenna on the base level mask, because that's how this thing operates. You can take out those antenna, replace them with the zombie ones, and then take out the faceplate and then replace it with the zombie faceplate, and then you have some approximation of a zombie Giant-Man. I particularly like this faceplate because it's got a nice animated look to it, and I think that it looks very appealing. It has a level of grotesque about it that is just right and not too disgusting. And for being totally honest about this, it could fit in very nicely with some of the What If zombie action figures that have been released from Marvel Legends. Granted, those are more MCU type action figures, but if you use your imagination and put them together, I think that it wouldn't cause too much of a clash. The second tier that's unlocked at 14,000 backers is not a faceplate, it's an entirely new head, and this is going to be a Skrull head for Giant-Man. This one is going to be an entirely new head because the ears are a little too much to make interchangeable with Giant-Man's regular head. All in all, I think this is a pretty cool package for $200, and I'm particularly enamored that they decided to base this one off of Giant-Man's first appearance from Tales to Astonish number 49. Now, while I think that this is a pretty okay release, and for $200 it's much more reasonable than some of the other Haslabs we've had to deal with, there also begs the question here of whether or not it really needs to be a Haslab, because it is 24 inches tall, and that's really not an unheard of size for retail. There are toys, if you look for them, that sell at about that size, so I don't know that this one necessarily needed to be a Haslab. Now, I know that they have to do a Haslab every year because it's been established and it's expected at this point, but if they're going to do another Haslab at some point, I think I would like to have something a little bit different than just a large action figure. Something like a good playset or a large playset or a particularly notable vehicle would be something pretty cool to see. Something more notable than the Engine of Vengeance was. A lot of people have brought up the Fantastic car, that's not a terrible choice, or even part of the Shield Helicarrier, that would also be a pretty cool choice, I think. Even something Spider-Man related like a Daily Bugle playset would be pretty cool to have. I think the point here is that if we're going to have a Haslab, it would be nice to have something that would just be absolutely impossible to get into a retail aisle. Giant-Man doesn't seem like he's impossible because Marvel is already really popular, and convincing stores to carry a large Giant-Man action figure based on the Avengers is not that tough of a sell. Realistically, if someone told me that this action figure cost $100 to $150, I wouldn't bat an eye. At $200, it does seem slightly overpriced for what it is, but the fact still remains here that it is a better deal, I think, than some of the other Haslabs that we've gotten, and it's more focused than some of the other Haslabs, lest we forget the action figures that were included with the Engine of Vengeance and the Doctor Doom head that was included with Galactus. This Giant-Man Haslab, by comparison, seems like a more comprehensive Giant-Man experience, and for that I do have to give Hasbro some respect here, because the complaints that I had from previous years seem to have been taken into account here. So this is overall a good Haslab project, I think, and it is more or less worth taking a look at, though the fact still remains that I have to see more of that faceplate swapping feature before I ever consider getting into this one. Now that we've seen this entire Haslab project, guys, what else would we like to see with this one if possible? Now, I know that the Marvel Legends team said that they're not going to bake any action figures into the tiers of this project, but nevertheless, if we're going to have a comprehensive Giant-Man experience, it would be nice to have some kind of Hank Pym action figure maybe, as well as maybe a Wasp action figure. It feels like that would be part of a good comprehensive Giant Man experience, and even though they'd say they're not going to put any action figures with this one, I wouldn't mind it if they did have, say, an Ant-Man or a Hank Pym unmasked, or a Wasp action figure, any of that. They probably won't include any action figures in these tiers like they said they weren't going to, but it's fun to speculate, right? Well, Soulmates, what do you think of this Giant-Man Haslab? Is this one that you have to have for your collection? Is this one that you're interested in backing? Do you need to see more of it before you decide whether or not to back it? I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think of this project down in the comments, and be sure you let me know what you would love to see included with this one next, if possible. If you'd like to learn more about the new Spider-Man and Moon Knight retro card Target exclusives, you can watch that video here, Soulmates.